We will get going, and I want to welcome you all here tonight and thank you for joining us for this webinar on navigating the lockdown blues. This afternoon's webinar is brought to you by the Southern Highlands Suicide Prevention Program and Wingecarribee Shire Council. My name is Kath Brennan and I will be your host for the next hour. I would like to start with an acknowledgement of country by acknowledging the many lands on which we're meeting on here this afternoon. I'm situated on the Gundungurra land and pay my respects to the traditional custodians of this land and to the elders past, present and emerging. I also acknowledge the traditional custodians of the various lands on which we all meet tonight and the Aboriginal and Torres Strait Islander people participating in this webinar. I work at Council. I'm the coordinator of community development there and work with a fabulous team who work in all aspects of the community, including this program. This afternoon is part of a whole range of COVID safe activities that are happening as part of Mental Health Month. Mental Health Month is a chance to promote activities and ideas that can have a positive impact on our daily lives and the lives of others. These events and messages are tied together with a specific theme, and this year's theme is Tune In. So I'm inviting you all to tune in to this webinar. I guess for me, tune in means being present. It means being aware of what is happening within you and in the world around you. This afternoon, I asked you to tune into our panel and ask also some questions along the way. You'll notice down the bottom there is a Q&A button. For those who are not familiar with Zoom in the past, please feel free to use that to ask any questions and we'll endeavour to get to them as we go through the webinar this afternoon. There's also a chat button there, so if you feel like just giving a shout out from where you are and where you're located, we'd love to hear that too. I appreciate that some of you may be triggered by some information that's discussed today, and there will be useful contacts that will be displayed. So I encourage you to reach out and seek support if you need that. The information is of a general nature today. I guess we can't deal with specifics of people's situations, but we know there's some general themes that we want to cover, and hopefully there'll be something for everyone that's available in what's discussed today. So I'd like to start by introducing our panel, who have very kindly come on board. All are members of the Southern Highlands Suicide Prevention Program. So meet Carmel. Hi, Carmel. Carmel is a local mental health carer advocate with One Door Mental Health and is the chair of the Southern Highlands Suicide Prevention Program. Carmel supports carers and family members who care for loved ones with severe and persistent mental health concerns. Carmel's incredibly passionate about what she does in this space and also for those impacted directly or indirectly by suicide, and that also includes police and first responders. Carmel's other passion is engaging with service providers and community members in starting to have open, honest conversations about suicide in the hope to lessen the stigma around mental health. Something you may not know about Carmel, which looking at her now, you'll go, what? Carmel used to ride bulls in local rodeos until she realized she was much better at falling off and getting injured than staying on. So welcome, Carmel, and thank you for being with us tonight. I'd like to introduce Ryan. Ryan is a suicide prevention services coordinator with Lifeline Macarthur and is also a really valued member of the Southern Highlands Suicide Prevention Program. Ryan loves to volunteer his time with the community, helping others, enjoys reading and loves music. And I think he's getting better at being a barista with a new van that they've got that's traveling around the countryside with Lifeline, supporting various community events. So something you may not know about Ryan is he's ambidextrous. However, he prefers to use his right hand most of the time. But I think if you're playing cricket, it'd be a fun fact to kind of change around in between bowls. So thank you, Ryan, for being with us tonight. Nicole. Nicole is a community worker and also a domestic family violence caseworker and a valued member of the Southern Highlands Suicide Prevention Program. Nicole works with the Highlands Community Centre based in Bowral. Nicole is passionate about empowering people to make life-enhancing change and is also very passionate about gardening, something that has enhanced the health and well-being of all of us, I think, especially now with the spring days that are warmer and longer. A fun fact about Nicole is she is trained as I'm going to start stumbling on this again, Nicole, and are you, oh my goodness, Nicole, help me out here.
Thanks, Kath. Great to be here. I'm also an Ayurvedic chef. So for those of you that don't know, Ayurveda is a 5,000-year-old system of health and well-being. It's the sister science to yoga.
Thanks, Nicole, for that. I'm sorry, I did practice and I was still really bad at it. The first topic we want to discuss tonight is around homeschooling and also returning to the workplace. So as we've seen today in New South Wales, COVID restrictions have changed once again. So by the 25th of October, all children will be returning to school again. And I guess there's also opening up for people to be returning to work after working from home for a very long period. Now, for the Highlands, that's been since the middle of June, but for other areas, it's been a lot longer. And we know it's been a struggle. And we know that there's a lot of anxiety out there, especially in children and young people, around that returning to school. So I'd love to throw it open to you for your comments around that.
I think when we're talking about change can be triggering for everybody, depending on the circumstances and depending on what that looks like. It doesn't necessarily mean it's a negative impact always, but it can be challenging. And we're seeing a lot of people are already getting quite anxious around returning to work and kids returning back to school. It's always helpful to be mindful that a little bit of anxiety around perhaps going back is completely normal. It's a natural reaction that we have, and it's not a negative thing. However, if it is impacting on day-to-day life, if it's impacting on your relationships and your happiness, then it is something to be worth looking at. There are lots of little things that we can do at home to prepare both ourselves and kids for going back and transitioning back, especially when we've sort of been given quite short notice. The dates have changed, the time frame's changed. So people are sort of preparing for a few weeks' time and suddenly it's Monday's looking very different for a lot of us. It sounds ironic, but communication is key. Having open communication with your kids and yourself or your partner about how you're feeling about the sudden change coming up. And most importantly, validate. Always validate someone's feelings. It's not very helpful to have language around don't be silly or you have nothing to worry about. That's not helpful. That's not going to ease any angst around the situation. Rather try really open communication around that. Don't ask direct questions, are you anxious about seeing your friends? Just open, broad communication around all your friends will be back tomorrow. How do you feel about that? We don't want to put into our kids' minds that there should be a reason to be anxious about a particular topic. Rather, let them tell you how they're feeling and guide it that way. Routine's also really important. So maybe setting alarms a little bit earlier now, getting them back into the routine of getting up earlier, the drive to school, the commute to school, and the afternoons, whatever your routine normally was, whether it was homework and then dinner or whatnot. And the same for yourself. It's also helpful for kids to sort of reach out to their friends prior to going back to school, little chats so that it's eased in on where they are. And the same for mums and dads that are going back to work. Check in with your co-workers, send them a quick email, good to see you, or it'll be great to see you in a week's time. I think the key is to ease into it. But another thing that's proven quite well last year with lockdown and coming out of that, although not quite as intense as this one, was parents relaying to children their own concerns. Mummy's feeling a little bit nervous about going back to work too, but that's okay. It's a good thing. Change can be a little bit nerve-wracking sometimes. Kids will reflect parents, so they will often understand if a parent is stressed or concerned or worried. It's when we don't talk to them about it that their little imaginations are left to run wild and sort of turn out to be much, much far worse than what the actual reality is. So having that open communication with them, letting them know that you relate and how you handle it will help them mirror how they handle it. It's a lot of self-regulation, checking in with yourself. But yeah, only key, validate how they're feeling.
Thank you, Carmel. Ryan.
Yeah, going off the back of what Carmel was sort of saying is, showing yourself, your friends, your family, your peers, your work colleagues, compassion and patience and kindness. I think going back to, what they now class as the new normal, is something that will take time to adjust to, and giving yourself that time to really slowly ease into it as well. It's something that we're all sort of going to have to do, but having that open communication and being able to talk about that, as what Carmel said, is 100% on the ball. Communication is the best way to be able to experience and let other people know how you feel, as well as, if that conversation does start, 9 times out of 10, the person you're talking to may also be having some feelings around that as well. So you're not isolated having those feelings. It's something that we're all sort of going to have, and that anxiety about going back to school or work is something that's definitely going to impact a lot of people. Like for most of us, well, for some of us, returning to work and school might be exciting, seeing your friends, seeing your work colleagues, seeing everyone around you. For others, they may not really care either way. And for some people, it can definitely bring up a lot of feelings of uncertainty, unease. There's a lot of concern around that as well. And I guess also when you sort of look at it, some people may have really enjoyed working from home, and going back into the office may be something that they're not looking forward to, because they may not feel that they're as productive, or they may not have all of that sort of stuff around them. They may not be able to finish work and go see their family and things like that as well. And in reverse as well, if they're around their family the whole time, then maybe that work, going back into work, is something that's easier for them to do, so that they're actually able to focus on their work and school and everything like that as well.
Thank you, Ryan. Nicole.
Amazingly comprehensive. Thank you, Carmel and Ryan. I don't have much more to add to what you've already said, but I think it's really important. Some of the strategies that we use while in lockdown would still apply as we're coming out of it. So keep things simple. Don't expect too much of yourself or others. I made a note to not make any rash decisions. If things have been really tough for you during lockdown, maybe now isn't the time to move house or break up with your husband or whatever it might be. Just really take some time to let the dust settle before perhaps going forward with something that you might desperately want to do just now. I've called these the usual suspects, of course, coming back to exercise, walking, if nothing else. We just live in such a beautiful environment, eating well, sleeping well if you can, sticking to a routine, especially a morning routine. That will be important for everyone just now. And just really remembering that this is actually a once in a lifetime experience. This is extraordinary what we've all been through, and while there might still be more to come, we just really need to take time to think, actually, this was really challenging. This was so weird. We didn't know what was coming next. If you are somebody that loved actually being in isolation and you're continuing to isolate, just push yourself a little each day to stepping back out into the world. Just take that slowly, and as you take those small steps, just pause to congratulate yourself for doing something that maybe you found a little bit difficult. And if there was something from lockdown you enjoyed doing, can you keep doing it? You know, maybe we don't need to go right back to how things were before lockdown. And really importantly, if you need help, and we'll talk about this a little bit more, it's really important that you do seek help. And we'll talk some more a little bit later about places that you can actually go to do that. And I think, yeah, I think we've just about covered everything.
Thanks, Nicole. I think, you know, the important point you all recognise was it's okay to not be okay, that we have this pursuit of happiness where we have to be positive and embracing life every minute. And it's been a struggle for many people on many different levels. And what we've felt will be very different for someone else, and how they've managed and their fears and their anxieties, whether it's been in lockdown or fear of what coming out of lockdown means. Everyone's going to be individual in how they approach this. So I think, you know, it's okay to say some days we have good days, some days they're okay, and some days they're pretty bad. And looking at the strategies for how we can manage that. I guess just wanted to focus just on parents and thinking about how do they recognise in children and young people if they are struggling with anxiety or fear, but they're not feeling confident about sharing that.
So normally 2 key signs that your child might be feeling a bit anxious and it's actually impacting on them is headaches and belly aches, the 2 aches. If your child or children tend to have lots of headaches and not want to do certain things or tasks, the reason being, apart from getting an education, is that we don't want to reinforce that those concerns are reality, concrete reality for them, that there's something that can be worked through. And often we find if children do push through that anxiety and go to school gently, if it needs to be, you know, maybe not 5 days a week, but gently keep going, they themselves come to the realization that perhaps their fears and concerns weren't as bad as they had thought, whether it's, you know, friends or schoolwork or teachers. But there's ways that we can support young ones in doing that. Professionals, you know, no therapist is going to turn you away because you want to see them for advice on how to help your loved one. No therapist. It doesn't need to be for you. You can go see someone professionally and talk to them about strategies on how you can support your loved one, and in turn open up that conversation with them. You know, sweetheart, I noticed you've been getting headaches a lot of the time in the morning. Do you think maybe, you know, are you worried about anything? Is anything stressing you that mummy can help with? Things like that. Open communication. Lack or gain of appetite is also a key indicator. And obviously, you know, their hygiene movements. Hygiene is normally a clear indication if someone's struggling a little bit. So if they're not wanting to shower or go play out with their friends and get dirty like they normally would, if it's going on for a couple of days, then it's probably something worth addressing. Remembering, you know, slight anxiety around change is normal. However, it's showing impacts on their routine, their happiness, their day-to-day lives. If it's lasting for anything more than about 2 to 3 weeks, it's time to go speak to someone about how you can support your loved one.
Thanks for that, Carmel. Ryan, I might direct this question that's come in to you, if that's okay. So I guess it's a similar question around looking at more adults in our lives. So how do you determine if someone you know is just going through the lockdown blues or has more serious mental health concerns that may need more care or support? What are those signs and symptoms?
Yeah, it's quite similar to what Carmel sort of said as well. It's a universal thing. A good thing that Carmel did sort of that I want to highlight again that she said was, I've noticed that, you know, you're doing this now. Recognizing those signs that there has been a change in either personality, hygiene, sleeping patterns, and on all of those sort of aspects is something to really have a look into. And they're sort of those signs that you can sort of pick up by not necessarily needing to have that conversation at the start. You can sort of see if there's sort of changes around that, but definitely having that conversation and saying, look, I've noticed that this and that has sort of changed. Is there something that, you know, can we have a conversation about that? Is there something that we can talk about? Is sort of the best way to go about that. In terms of whether it's the lockdown blues or a serious mental health concern, same sort of timeframes as what Carmen said as well. If it's been going on for a couple of weeks, then that's something to sort of have a look into. There is heaps of different services that you can call, obviously Lifeline being one of them. It's not just a crisis line. We do service it as a crisis line, but anyone's free to call and discussion. So I would definitely encourage them to give Lifeline a call and just talk about what's been going on for them as well. And then we'll actually be able to let them know, look, you know, there are some services that may be available and beneficial for you as well. So it's just sort of having a look into that. Definitely encouraging to seek help or have a conversation is something that it doesn't hurt the day after you notice or on the day that you noticed. The quicker you get in to have that conversation and open that dialogue, the more they're going to be able and willing to have that conversation with you and see how that goes as well.
Yeah, thanks, Ryan. Sometimes it does take those sort of difficult conversations takes courage. And that sort of starting, I've noticed, is often just a way of opening up that conversation, which is great. Thank you. Nicole, I wanted to talk to you about, you know, during lockdown, family dynamics and relationships have been really tested. Whether it's in your partnership, your relationship with your children, the relationship with your older parents, other significant people in your life. I guess, you know, there's been concerns raised around the increased level of family violence and what's been happening within homes. I just wanted you to comment around issues that you've just been noticing in the work that you've been doing.
There's no doubt that being in isolation with family members that are also perpetrators is extremely tough. They've done research that and anecdotally, just through the police and also through domestic violence services, that there has been an increase in the severity of domestic and family violence during the lockdowns. And also an increase in coercive control, and very difficult for women to get out to seek help. And there's also been an increase in women that have experienced domestic violence for the first time. So what I guess now that we're coming out of the lockdown, what I would encourage, and I'll say women to do, is to seek help. Even though it's extremely difficult to reach out for help, there is help and support out there for you. We have several services in the Highlands that can support you. Highlands Community Centres, Pop In, and the Winter Caribbean Domestic and Family Violence Service. You need to know that we will believe whatever you tell us, and that you also don't need to tell us anything that you're not comfortable with. Your safety is of paramount importance. So if you do feel like you're at risk of serious harm, you do need to call the police. It's the first thing that you need to do. I also know that women are incredibly creative in terms of keeping themselves and their children safe, and they do what they need to do to keep themselves safe. I know that it can be exhausting, second guessing the actions of a perpetrator. Domestic and family violence is really, really complicated. The other thing I want to reassure women of is that you'll never be asked, why haven't you left already? That's just not something that any of us would, we know why you. Women can and do leave violent relationships. So it is possible. I won't, it's easy, but better to happen. Appropriate referrals to financial services, to victim. We can and all those sorts of things. You need to know that what's happening to you is not your fault, and that you shouldn't blame yourself for the actions of a perpetrator. Isolation and frustration and financial stress can lead to an escalation in violence. It's not an appropriate excuse for violence. There is never an excuse for violence. So I would just really, and also of course there's 1-800-RESPECT and the DV lines that you can also call if you need to do that. But I just want to assure you that there is help out there for you. And I know it's really, really tough to reach out.
Thanks, Nicole. That's really helpful. We've had another question come in, which Carmel, I might put to you first. So the question is around working with people that you feel might be experiencing the blues. Is it better to cheer them up or get them to talk about their feelings?
I think it depends on person by person, but traditionally have the conversation. There's ways in which you can do it so it doesn't need to be a serious and deep conversation. However, let them know that you are noticing a change because something has changed for you to be aware that perhaps they're struggling, and let them know that it's a safe space to talk about whatever it is that they need to talk about. And most importantly, remember that you don't need to have the answers. You don't need to be a therapist. You don't need to be a policeman or a DV worker, or a mental health worker. You can just be someone that's compassionate, and that will more than often be enough. If you're struggling with communication, a lot of I have noticed this. It sort of puts a little bit of confrontation on them in terms of they feel the need to be honest. They can't lie because you're saying, I have noticed you're running late to work every day. I noticed you're not perhaps dressed in your normal attire. If they're, sort of their hygiene is lacking. It sort of shocks them into being honest. So remember eye language, and then back it up with, if you don't know how to support them, let them know that. Oh, Kath, I'm not real sure how to support you right now, but why don't we find someone who can, and I'll do that with you. They don't expect you to be heroes. More often than not, they will have the answers that they need for their own situation. It's just a sounding board to map it out too. So just be that safe space for them to do that with. And of course, if you have serious concerns about someone's welfare at work, always seek management support and let them know. It's always better to be safe than sorry.
Thanks for that, Carmel. Yes, it's interesting, isn't it, around the use of humour. I know I use that a lot for myself, and it's a way of often engaging in conversation about laughing at the silly things that are happening in our lives too. And because yes, it can be really tough at times, and you want to cheer people up. You don't want to see them sad or withdrawn. So yeah, humour is often a way. I know that people often use physical exercise as a way too. So I think walking and talking I have really enjoyed as a bit of a, my own health and well-being, and being out and being active, getting the endorphins going, and taking notice, and just tuning into your environment, I think too, is just really lovely to be able to have the opportunity to do that today. Ryan, another question that's come in, and thank you for sending those in. This is really helpful. I often find I am comparing my situations to others to give me a better perspective. But this sometimes feels like I'm putting a rug over how I'm actually feeling, or trying to be happy to keep some joy in the household. How do I be honest about how I'm feeling without impacting or bringing those down those around me? Sorry.
I guess when it comes to sort of that aspect and having that, you're feeling yourself, that you're feeling one way, but then you're also trying to present yourself in a different way, is quite conflicting for yourself. And that would definitely be a struggle to be able to do that as well. in terms of talking to people without sort of bringing language that you can choose to use as well. You know, you don't have to sort of go completely in depth at the start. You can definitely say, hey, look, today's not a very good day. I've been struggling a little bit today. And then just ease into that conversation. It won't bring that person down. It will actually, from my experience, it actually makes me feel better that someone's actually reaching out to me and saying, hey, I need some help. Because then that for me really means that, okay, one, they trust me, and two, we're going to actually be able to sort of sort something out together. I don't know all the answers, and I'm definitely not going to say that I know all the answers when it comes to mental health or services and anything like that, but I'll definitely work with them and be able to say, okay, well, it sounds like that this has sort of been happening for you. So how about we go talk to the GP? How about we go talk to some services and see what can be done? And then going with them as well. So starting that conversation really light on. It doesn't have to be something that goes directly intense, and it doesn't have to be one single conversation either. You can do one day and then pick up that conversation again next week and do a little bit more. It doesn't have to be one full massive sort of block chunk to be able to do that as well. And if you are worried about bringing the people down around you as well, there are services that you can talk to, or your local GP, to be able to start that conversation as well if you are worried about bringing people around you down as well.
Yes, I think sometimes, you know, we're seen as the rock within a grouping, a household, a family unit. And sometimes that can be very wearing. And so where do you go? And you know, when others are relying on you for that support, for that energy to be positive and strength, that can be really hard at times. Yeah, so we acknowledge that. And yeah, sometimes it may be about, like you said, Ryan, seeking external support for that, to guide you through, and not feel like you're letting people down, or that you know, you're not, you know, I think it's quite you know, all these conversations of courage where, you know, you're actually talking about real feelings that you're experiencing and being honest and open with those of importance around you. Thank you for that. I guess when we're talking about mental health and well-being during these times, being aware of the various services that are available, and I guess we're focusing primarily on the Windsor Caribbean surrounding areas. Can you give us a few heads up on the different services that we have access to?
Yeah, definitely. I'll share the screen as well. So there's a whole heap of services that you can sort of see. These are just sort of hotlines that people can call. A lot of them are 24/7 as well. Nicole will probably be able to go into a little bit more detail about sort of services that are more specific sort of geographically as well. For youth, you've got Reframe, Community Links, fantastic. 100% I would recommend anyone that's, you know, within that 12 to 25 years to go to Reframe. They're one of the best services that I've sort of seen within the area. Also, if you're not sure sort of what services are available or where to go, contacting your local GP is fantastic. And also call Lifeline and actually ask what services are available where I am. We'll only ask a couple questions because we don't get much data anyway. Just postcode and sort of suburb that you live in, and we'll actually be able to find a lot of services that are local for you, which is a really good resource to be able to have, just to call Lifeline, let them know about what's going on, and see what services are available.
Thanks, Ryan. Carmel, did you have some suggestions you wanted to make?
Look, I agree with Ryan. Reframe has certainly impacted the Windsor Caribbean in an enormous positive way in terms of youth mental health and support. both for kids who may be struggling with not only mental health concerns, but also identity and sexuality and all those things that come with puberty and high school and all those horrible stages of life we all have to go through. It's not always clinical either. They do have the drop-in centre where youth can just go and be in a safe environment, in a safe space. Obviously, due to COVID, that had been locked down, but I'm sure with it easing, that will soon be back up and running as normal. There are youth workers that are in the hub monitoring that space as well to make sure that the youth are safe. And if they want to talk, then they have the opportunity to. And if they want more clinical support, then they're given a worker and that clinical support provided. The other one that I tend to refer a lot of clients to and friends is You in Mind, which is also Community Links funded through PHN. And it's basically the adult version. So you're provided with clinical supports who can do home visits and phone, or you can obviously go to their office down in Bowral. However, home visits have been off the last few months due to COVID and keeping the community safe. Safety is paramount. However, they have been working hard at telephone, Zoom, online, like all the other mental health services, and trying to fill that gap temporarily. But hopefully things will start moving forward and getting back into home visits, that face-to-face support. It's useful in that a lot of people don't always want to go to an office space for clinical supports. It feels a little bit too clinical. So this is where that service, being able to do home visits, really aligns with a lot of people who, for whatever reason, don't feel comfortable being seen going perhaps into a mental health building, or are struggling so poorly with their own mental well-being that they don't really want to go outside, and that's fine. That's okay. So it's about being able to have choice and control around your supports. And something Ryan said before about the earlier the better. It is earlier to touch on those supports earlier rather than later. It actually speeds up your recovery mentally. You'll recover much faster if you do engage in supports than if you let it go on for quite a substantial amount of time. You'll find that more often than not, those feelings will escalate and will get somewhat worse. So it's, no different from a physical illness. It's always best to address cuts and things first before it gets infectious. It's the same with our mental well-being. But for services, Nicole is definitely the expert, and her service is paramount in providing information on all the local services available. So I'll hand over to Nick.
Thanks, Carmel. Yes, if you are ever not sure of exactly where to go for help, you can just call Highlands Community Centres and we will just point you in the right direction. And that's across the board for any sort of service that you think you might need. But yes, for free counselling, we also refer to You in Mind. Just for those that maybe don't quite know what a mental health care plan is, you go and see your GP and your GP will do a referral to local psychologists. With that, you'll need to pay a small gap fee, whereas You in Mind is completely free. I just want to also mention the Southern Highlands Bereavement Care Service, an excellent counselling service we have here in the Highlands. It's for people that have lost someone through death, but they also deal very much with people that have lost something through, if you've experienced loss through losing a job or physical health, or so they deal with all sorts of grief and loss. And I would highly recommend that if you feel like you fit a little bit more into that category. For women that have experienced domestic violence, you can get free counselling through Victim Services. I quite often do the application for clients. It's quite a simple application form. You don't need to talk so much about what you've been through. And sometimes if you're finding paperwork or the computer just a pain, then I can do that for you. So that's free. And that's free counselling with local counsellors in the area. They put themselves on the Victim Services list. So that's something else. That's for actually anyone that's experienced violent crime. Yes, so for counselling, for mental health issues, they're our main services here in the Highlands. But of course, the lines, Lifeline, DV line, 1800 Respect, and Men's Line as well, if you just want to pick up the phone. And I think Lifeline, Ryan, you can talk to this. You can text now, can't you? And I'm not sure about email. So you don't even need to speak to someone if you don't actually want to do that either.
Yeah, definitely. We've got a text service that's available from midday to 2 a.m. There's a mobile number to text, which I don't have on me at the moment, unfortunately, but you can definitely go to the Lifeline Australia website and check to see if they're online as well. It has it on the top right-hand corner. And then we've also got an instant messaging service, which is online on the computer that you can do as well. So you don't actually have to physically text, and that's available on the same time, which is the midday to 2 a.m. And then obviously we have our crisis line that's 24/7.
I just also wanted to add too, I know that we have had a change in psychiatry within the area. Unfortunately, certain psychiatrists have moved on or sadly passed away, and they provided an enormous amount of support for many, many people over many, many years. And we're now finding a lot of community members are now confronted with that process of starting a new relationship with a new psychiatrist, getting their medication scripts filled currently, and that feeling of, I guess, abandonment and vulnerability over sudden changes. There is a service called Docatella, and what happens is you can go see your GP, and the GP will contact Docatella, which is online or Zoom psychiatry, and a psychiatrist will actually Zoom with you with your GP and talk about what it is that you're in need of. It's free. And then your GP can actually prescribe with the Docatella psychiatrist your medication that's needed. Now, that may not be a permanent fixture for someone, that may not be a long-term solution, but in the short term, for anyone that might be stuck or struggling at the moment, I know there's been a few people reach out. You can just make an appointment with your GP, let them know you want to speak to Docatella, and then some sort of medication support can be provided to you in the interim, and hopefully referrals made to those coming into the area that can provide that more ongoing face-to-face monitoring and support for any sort of medication needs around mental health. And of course, there are carer services in the area too for anyone that's a carer of a loved one who may be going through mental health concerns or physical disabilities. You can reach out and get that support, and those services are all free as well.
And Carmel, you mentioned Reframe and You in Mind. Now, you don't need a referral to go to those, do you?
No, you can self-refer. You can. If you go to the Community Links website and go to their services, intake email and phone number. So you can either email them your own referral or phone. If you procrastinate like me and you can't quite do that for yourself, Nick, myself, we can make those referrals on your behalf without actually being your worker as such, just to lend a helping hand there. And their turnaround times normally very quick in terms of responding to you. Yes, we've heard you. We will delegate someone to you. They're not services that necessarily believe in waiting lists yourself.
That's fantastic. And in the chat there is the Lifeline mobile number and also the website to Community Links. Thanks for putting that in, Michelle. We've got some great questions coming in still. Thank you so much to participants for doing that, because this is really where we want to get to today. Question here, and probably for you all to have a think about, is that most people who live with mental illness have at some point been blamed for their condition. I guess, do you have any tips on how to fight stigma around mental health, whether it's for children, teenagers, and or the workplace?
So I've found in trying to battle stigma for quite some time, and unfortunately the Highlands traditionally has been quite bad for stigma around mental health, even though it's getting a lot better, thank goodness. Education is key. People that don't understand something, anything, the natural human reaction is to fear it. And when we fear it for long enough, we get angry at it. Perfect example is any alien movie ever made in the history of mankind, we shoot first. We don't, same with stigma of any kind. If we don't understand it, that's our natural response, unfortunately. it would be nice to think that they're well educated around whatever mental health issue they're living with. It doesn't always happen. More often than not, a diagnosis is provided without much support around that. So it's also great to educate yourself around your own mental wellness. If you are diagnosed with something, say bipolar, educate yourself around bipolar. Not just Dr. Google, but actually go and take courses in it. Have a grave understanding about what is going on for yourself. It will also give you a lot of more in-depth into how you cope with things on a day-to-day basis. And then that can help you educate those around you and how to best support you. Because anyone who would understand anything about mental health, wellness or illness would understand that it's never someone's fault, or you can't choose to have it. It's developed. And there's 3 family history, a predisposition to mental illness. So that somewhere along the line, great grandpappy perhaps had a little bit of anxiety, and that genetically has passed down through. Or perhaps you had a great estranged relative that everyone just put in the odd corner where they actually might have lived with schizophrenia. There is a predisposition there, and then that's normally mirrored with things that impact on our social and biological standards. So and social. So whether it's we go through a traumatic event in childhood, we go through traumatic events during our life, we use certain substances that have a chemical reaction to us. These are all factors that contribute to developing a mental health concern or disorder. It's never a chosen class. You can't just suddenly wake up one day and say, I want schizophrenia or I have it. That's not how it happens. It's developed, and it is no fault of the individual whatsoever. People have a misconception that one thing leads to mental illness. It doesn't. It takes an array of different factors for a mental health disorder to develop. People have this poor idea that because mum and dad got divorced, I developed bipolar, or because I smoked a joint once when I was 9, I developed this. It doesn't quite work that way. There's more factors, and it's important to educate people around that, because more often than not, a lot of parents and family members also feel an immense amount of guilt, feeling that something they've done has caused their loved one to now live with this concern. And it can be a heavy load to carry. So it's about educating each other, lightening that load, and working out how to best support one another. Because once we fully understand what our loved one is going through, then you can truly support them and share that load. And then gradually we will get there with the stigma. Unfortunately, there will always be those we cannot educate that are stuck in their ways, and that's okay. Just accept that and move on, perhaps distance yourself from them. And those you can educate, do it. Have those open conversations. Hey, do you know much about schizophrenia? Let's sit down and have a conversation about it. Because the stigma is dangerous. People perceive certain disorders as being very dangerous. People hear the word schizophrenia and they automatically think that that means someone's a perpetrator and that they're violent. When they're 89% more likely to be the victim of an assault than the perpetrator, because they're actually quite vulnerable. But media, unfortunately, does play a lot in this. We will see titles where people label people with mental illness as perpetrators. There could be 2 people shot someone, and one of them may live with a mental health concern, and suddenly a schizophrenic person shoots someone when they may not have actually shot the gun. So media over the years, unfortunately, has played a huge role in stigma around how we perceive certain mental illnesses. And so has culture. The amount of times I hear women classed as bipolar because they're moody. We're allowed to be moody. It doesn't mean we live with a mental health concern. And that's also quite offensive to someone who can live with bipolar, because that takes an amazing amount of courage. So it's about, educating ourselves, educating our loved ones, and showing a little bit of love and respect for those that are carrying that weight and fighting the battle.
Thanks, Carmel. I can sense your passion there. We're very, very fortunate to have you working in our community. Ryan, in the workplace, we're good at labeling. We're all great at diagnosing everyone's issues and problems and throwing a label at it, like Carmel was referring to. Like, we'll call someone nuts, crazy, schizo, psycho. Who wants to work with them? I don't want them in my workspace. How do we call that out in the workplace?
Well, calling it out can be quite challenging, and I guess, it does come back to what Carmel said, being well informed and having that understanding behind it as well. there's a whole range of courses that Lifeline offers for free as well that can sort of start that conversation and being able to have a better understanding. The best one is Safe Talk. It's a really short course that basically is just being able to talk about things safely. Really, really good course to be able to sort of ease yourself into a lot of that mental health. And then obviously we have our mental health first aid and a couple other different courses as well. In terms of calling someone out, I wouldn't necessarily that Carmel was saying as well, you can use that in the same situation to actually start that conversation as well. I've noticed that, you know, you've been a little bit hostile towards whoever. Is there something going on? Is there something that we can help with? You know, and then trying to figure out what the actual concern is around that. And if it is that education aspect, then maybe it's about providing some information about that, or even offering some of the courses as well and saying, hey, these are available. Is that something you'd like to do?
Thanks, good plug there for those courses, Ryan. They are actually exceptional. Nicole, question for you, which is an interesting one. What's the best way to develop a safe space for your employees while working remotely and virtually? So I'm thinking about those conversations. How do we create that safe place when we're not, you know, we're used to being face to face and having those sort of conversations with somebody in that environment? How do we create that online?
Well, I do most all my client contact on the phone now, not so much online. But in some ways, it's the same principles as when you're working face to face. So listening really well, feeding back what you hear, not making assumptions, checking in. You know, asking people what they need from you you know, during this time. Really, you know, I guess really having an understanding of what the lockdown and this experience actually is for people that are isolated or experiencing violence in the home or struggling with mental health issues. Being available, but within, you know, within boundaries.
Sometimes it's hard because you can't read the body language as well. You know, how are they presenting today? Like the things Carmel talked about, you know, your personal presentation. Like, yeah, we might notice the hair's not as clean, although we're not getting to hairdressers these days. So hair's getting longer and a bit wilder and woollier. So, you know, not making assumptions like you said about that, but having those sort of direct questions that you might sort of tap in a bit more pointed than normal.
Yeah, definitely. You know, knowing what someone's routine is and just hearing about what their activities are and what they're doing and what they're not doing and what they're pulling away from, those sorts of things.
Yeah. Another great question, which is focused on supporting teens and the pre-teens, the tweens. Can you recommend any good books or movies, websites, pop culture, that address mental health challenges in a supportive and compassionate way? What's coming to mind?
Look, the names escape me, but you can Google, I think Pixar did 2 or 3 movies based purely on a child's mental wellness around their brain. So there's a really great one where there's sort of different coloured marble people that live inside the brain, and they go through this young girl's different emotions going through a divorce and starting school. We will find the names of these and pop them up somewhere or send them up. But there's soft entry, I think, into children identifying and relating to mental health and mental wellness, and whether that means if it's going well or poor, and the difference between that and how to support them during that. It is important, especially with tweens, and I love that question was asked, so much gets sort of pushed aside as puberty. You know, oh, it's a puberty blues. They're going through that change. It's not always puberty. Sometimes there are underlying mental health concerns that mirror the same symptoms as puberty blues. So when in doubt, you know, don't mess about, go and see someone professionally, and really push your point that you want to be very sure that this may not just be hormonal changes, and that there might be some psychological supports needed there. Because again, early intervention in teens or tweens can have really positive and lasting impacts on them as they go through their later teens and early adulthood. And we really want to make sure that we build up resilience in that age group, so that mental health or serious mental health disorders don't necessarily develop in the first place. If we build up really great coping techniques and resilience in our young people and our teens, we give them a really good fighting chance against developing disorders, even if there is a predisposition in family lines. So it's about, yeah, support and education. So we will send out or get up information around different Pixar movies. But yeah, there's certainly a few out there now.
Yeah, thank you to Michelle Williams, who's working fastly in the background there. She's put it into the chat. Some great conversation starters about mental health. So thank you for that, Michelle. Appreciate it. So we're just getting close to the end of our time. So I want to pose a question to you all to think about. What do you do for yourself for self-care?
I'll go. Actually, the things that I do are things that I teach women in my program, My Life, My Dreams. And we have 3 practices that we do as a part of that program. And one of them is daily gratitude. And as I tell the women in the program, I'm not making this stuff up. The stuff that I talk to you about all has an evidence base. And so practicing daily gratitude is just one of the key things that you can do for well-being. It doesn't mean that you pretend that everything's okay, but it does mean that you can put some focus on the things that are good, even if it's a very, very tiny thing. Like I'm grateful that I've just got this hot cup of tea in front of me on this cold winter's morning. It doesn't need to be big stuff. Definitely walking every day. You know, there's just so much research about that, but also it feels good. And it gives you the opportunity to be outside, be in nature, breathe some fresh air, and breath work. So just really focusing on your breath, that this is something that it just underpins good physical health, mental health, and your overall sense of well-being. It's something that you can use and that you have with you all the time. I mean, you just can't not be without your breathing, right? So, and this is also backed up by research. I recently contacted all the past participants from the last program, and of course, just to check in, see how they were going. Of course, COVID's been very, very challenging. And they said, and I said, are you doing anything from the program? They all said, I'm still breathing. I'm still doing that breath work every day. So, really important. Just a little plug for a free app called Insight Timer. It has so many free meditation apps and breathing practices. It's got music, it's got chanting, it's got yoga nidras, which help you with your sleep. And I would just highly recommend that for anyone that says, oh, I don't know about meditating. It's just a really great free resource. Another strategy I'll talk to anyone that will listen to me about is, and in line with tuning in, it's taking the opportunity to take in the good. So if I'm on my walk and I see something lovely or a baby smiles at me, rather than just thinking, oh, that baby smiled at me, you just have a moment where you take in the good feeling and you let that sink in. And that helps rewire your brain for happiness and positivity. So it's really important when we have these nice moments, when someone makes you a nice coffee, when you have a lovely chat, when you see a beautiful flower, that you just pause for a moment and let it sink in. Again, it's backed up by research. It's great for your brain, and you just have these, and then you build on these sort of moments of loveliness. So that's really about, that's my last word on tuning in.
Thank you for that, Nicole. Ryan, give us your hot tip for self-care.
Just going off the back of what Nicole said as well, be that person that also gives that little smile, gives those things to someone else, so that way they can take that time as well to be able to hold on to that as well. That's a really good way of being able to give back as well as take as well. For myself, I do a couple different things, and they're a little bit random. Definitely walking, going outside in the fresh air when I can is fantastic. I also allocate, it should be half an hour, sometimes it's 10 minutes, it depends whatever I can fit in, where I sort of just turn my phone off, turn off the TV, and just, I wouldn't necessarily say, a lot of people when you say meditate is, you're sitting there with your legs crossed on the floor and the hands in the air, yeah. But just taking that time to close your eyes and focus on your breathing, letting those thoughts come and go as easily as they do. If they do come into your head, you sort of just try and let them continue on. Try to do half an hour, sometimes it's 10 minutes, it depends whatever I can fit in, but it's just something where I know that in that day I can give to myself as well. And then of course I like to bake as well, which is a nice pastime. I actually really like to eat what I bake as well. But baking is something that's quite therapeutic. You don't really have to think too much about it. You see the recipe, you follow the recipe, and then you just go with it.
Yeah, I love that, Ryan. I love trying to get that quiet mind. Oh my goodness, what a challenge. Carmel, to wrap us up.
Oh, to wrap us up, I think Nick and Ryan, so on point. There's things that we often will teach carers around self-care, especially breathing, mantras, self-meditating, all those sorts of things. But for myself recently, because I did get some of the lockdown blues early on, I think, and because being pregnant, that was a different dynamic for me, also doing that in lockdown. So I felt that, walking a lot, which is why I do 1 Foot Forward. So, giving to charity or providing support to charities or helping others around me in my community make me feel better. Walking every day is a religious self-care practice now. If I don't, I feel it the next day. I feel mentally a bit foggy. So getting out, getting about, and also listening to my body. So being heavily pregnant now, I have a good nap every afternoon on my lunch break. And I also realized that showering in the dark was my moment of the house is quiet, everyone's gone to bed, I will shower in the dark with the lights off. And that's when I really relax. And I guess that's my meditation in a way, in that, like Brian said, I let thoughts come and go, they sort of wash away. And not having light helps me not to be visually stimulated by my environment. So I'm not looking at, oh, I need to clean that mirror, or where did that towel come from? Or you're just processing the sensation of warm water and it being relaxing. Followed up by the nap. Oh, I'm laughing every day. Wonderful. So relaxed.
Fantastic. All really helpful tips. Look, I want to thank the three of you, Ryan, Nicole, Carmel, for being here tonight and making yourself available to be part of this webinar. On tuning in, and I think that's what everyone's done tonight, is really focused, and we've had some lovely feedback about the webinar tonight, so thank you to the three of you, but special thanks to all those who joined us tonight. You've given us some great insight with your questions. I hope we've left you with some strategies, some inspiration, some ideas on moving forward and coming out of this lockdown blues. It's not far away, so yes, as we said, baby steps, conversations, acknowledging people's feelings, and being available to listen attentively to others. Thank you all so much. Have a great night, and I hope you can enjoy some other great things that are on offer during Mental Health Month. This session will be recorded, and I know it's going to be put on the Wingecarribee Council website. So if you feel like you want to revisit it, or there's other people who may benefit from listening to some of the ideas, the services available, or the information that was given, please direct them to the Wingecarribee Council website. Thank you and good night.